Recording, and I'm going to turn off my camera and mic.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My apologies for being late. I clicked the wrong link. Can everyone hear me okay? Amazing. Hi, Isabel. Whew. Let's see here. All right, everyone. Welcome to Tips for the Makeup Stage, or Tips for Stage Makeup, or Makeup Stage Tips, however you want to do it. So I have a separate DSLR. This is my camera here. If I look down, it's because I'm looking at my computer. So forgive the angles. Thank you, Tracy, for understanding. And I'll pop into the chat once in a while when I see that their new message on there. Today we're going over just basic makeup tips, and I'll bring you through a whole routine just so you can encounter my different ways and favorite ways to apply makeup, especially for stage. And you might even have to put on more, even though we're mostly performing on the digital stage. If you do use a ring light or several lights, light does take away. And even if you're on a device or a camera, because you are in front of that light, you will look like that you don't have anything on. You'll look washed out with little to no dimension. So we'll go over different ways that we can add a little more dimension without looking cakey, because we don't want to do that. Yes. So first step is to start with fresh skin. Now, with the priming step, you can encounter different variations or different options, right? You could just use your moisturizer, which is what I do. I apply a moisturizer that's not too emollient, something that might be more appropriate for at night before you go to bed. Not necessarily oil controlling, although I would recommend, if you do have oily skin, if you want to keep the oils at bay, or if you do want to use your moisturizer and a separate primer that's specially formulated for oily skin, in that it does have oil controlling properties in the formula, so that you're less likely to have a slick face throughout your performance, or if you have a long day online, that you don't have to blot as much, right? So choose the product that's best suited for your skin type. Secondly, in terms of foundation, I would say it's funny. Overall, I feel a lot of makeup companies are releasing more and more foundations that are medium coverage, because people love for their skin to show through a little, and get that. But with stage makeup, you definitely want a little more coverage, but the formulas are becoming much more advanced nowadays that you can achieve that heavy coverage without looking cakey or textured on the skin. So a couple of tools: you either can use a synthetic brush. This is a synthetic fiber brush. And because people like to use a brush that's synthetic, is that it doesn't absorb as much product. So you'll have more product on the skin, less product to be absorbed on the brush. This is a natural hair brush. It's undyed. And this absorbs a little more product, as you can see just from the bristles here. And this is more suitable if maybe you don't need a lot of coverage. So the natural hairbrush is going to absorb a little more and not leave as much on the skin like a synthetic brush. So these are the different brushes. Either one will do. They don't have to look like this specifically, but I usually like these shapes to stipple on foundation or to brush foundation. Now, if I were quickly going to the case here, you could also use a sponge. I would recommend that you wet the sponge. This is not wet. You wet the sponge, you squeeze the excess water, it'll swell up to be a lot bigger. People like sponges because it's easy to apply, like you see. I like a brush because I like pressing the makeup into my skin to ensure that it looks very skin-like and finish, and that it doesn't appear like a layer of makeup. So let's get our favorite foundation. If you got it, or if you don't have it, you just want to see technique, I like to mix too. I get a little alchemy when it comes to foundations. You most certainly can just use one. That's totally fine. I use a cream foundation that's more suitable for every day. Usually stage makeup. I see a lot of people use stick foundations. Stick foundations have a little more cream to them and they have a little more coverage. If you don't want to use so much coverage from your actual foundation, let's wait until the concealer step so we could address those. Like, for instance, I have a lot of hyperpigmentation here, as you can see. So I'll rely on concealer to cover that up and foundation to just even out my complexion, right? With that said, let me grab here it is. I like to use a spatula to just scoop out the foundation because it's in a jar. As you can see. And with that, taking a little bit here on the back of my hand. And the other foundation I like to use is a little more fluid in texture. And that just helps with the spreadability. So you can just see the difference between the two. That's the one I just pumped out. So you see it has a little more liquidness to it. And we'll mix it together. And I just like to dot it on first to get it all over. Make sure you got your mirror. I like to use a natural hairbrush because this brush specifically, it's just, I love the shape of it. It's like a paddle. So let's press this into the skin. And you see that it's not so much going to cover my hyperpigmentation. You still see it show through, but now you kind of see an evening out of the skin. This is the first layer that we'll work with. And then whatever you have on the back of your hand, you then continue to apply it on the rest of your face. I like to warm up product on the back of my hand first before applying it on the face, as it just warms up the product and it's more likely to just blend seamlessly into the skin, as you can see. And I use just these short strokes here to cover. And again, you kind of still see some hyperpigmentation showing through, but now my complexion is a lot more even. Yeah. And it's always nice to go in layers. It's easier to add, a lot tougher to take away. Fantastic. All right. Now, what do we do if we see, you know what, Alicia, the foundation is cool, but I still need to cover a little bit here. I like to go in with a concealer. Concealer is a more pigmented version formula than foundation, right? A foundation. So for instance, I like to go in with this concealer because it has a lot of coverage, a lot of coverage. Even if you see here as I place it on the back of my hand, it's far more potent than the foundation itself. If you want, though, if you feel that the concealer that you're using is a little too thick, then maybe go back a little bit with your foundation, especially if it has like a liquidy texture, right? So this is going to help emulsify the concealer a little bit. But now we have a brand new concoction. Look at that. We got to go in easy. So with that said, I would use a much smaller brush so I can have a little bit more control on the portions that I want more coverage on. So I'll just dot that much. That's what I had on my finger. I didn't even get to this. Use the smaller brush and then work that product where you need more coverage. So this will enable you again to add the coverage, but control the texture, control how it looks on your skin. If you don't have any tools at all, fam, fingers. Some of the most famous, influential makeup artists in the world use their fingers, especially during their complexion step. And that's far better. It's still peeking through, but you know what? If you're performing on a device, people are not going to see this especially if you're way back here, right? I'm using a separate camera, so unless you're like this, I highly doubt people will see those smaller imperfections. Now we'll go back to our concoction here with our smaller brush and go around the portions that need a little more coverage. Like I experience a lot of redness here around the nose. Color correcting, if someone is wondering about that, that's if you have discoloration around the mouth, under the eyes. Even so, if you insist on going in with a more peachier tone corrector, I will still warm it up on the back of my hand before the foundation. And then I'll go in the same manner that you saw, warm up the foundation on the back of our hand, apply it lightly, and then go in with a concealer afterwards if you feel you need more coverage on those portions of the face. I like to go in between the brows to make sure that's smooth. And I have some spots here to cover as well. And I like to push the product also into the skin. And any portions you see around the hairline, especially if you're wearing a wig, that if everything is prepped for the wig, make sure you work the makeup up in there. So when you do apply a wig, it looks seamless. How are we doing? Are we doing good so far? Okay. Under the eyes. People get a little crazy under the eyes. Okay? I'm sure you've all seen the Instagram swipe, right? They're putting concealer from inner corner to nostril. It's a lot. It is a lot. It's too much. I will only recommend that application technique if you have a sponge, okay? If you have a wet sponge, the wet sponge will take away some product, and that will enable you to get away with that huge application of concealer. But for me, that's wasting product, because if you're applying that much initially only to have it absorb some by your sponge, then you might as well just go in with a little bit and build from there like we did with the rest of our complexion. I like to go in very especially if your concealer is already high coverage. Just start with that. And you're like, Alicia, that's nothing. Okay, we'll just do that. Because you don't want to look cakey under the eyes, fam. You don't. Finger. Okay. Easiest way to go. Or you use a smaller brush. People like to use sponges because the sponge has moisture from the water, and the water does help work the product into the skin. And I would recommend that tool if you have very dry under eyes. I will also recommend that you prep the under eye well, that you make sure to apply your favorite eye cream well before you apply your concealer, because you don't want it to slip around. Most definitely. You want it to stay. In terms of the shade, I don't like to go super bright under my eyes. I like to go just enough so there's a little bit of contrast from the rest of my face. So as you see, it's not so bright under the eyes like drag queen style, which is a way to go. But I also want to introduce techniques that you can maybe take with you for every day also. Now, if you wanted a brighter under eye, if you wanted to really bump it up for stage, I would still start with your baseline shade first. And then if you have something a little brighter, I will apply that more on the center or inner corner. So this is a significantly lighter color. I will dot it right here where I want it to be a little brighter. Nothing more than that. Either take your finger or a brush and tap it right here. And I think this is more of a realistic or even easier way to go, even if for stage makeup. Because if you go too bright under the eyes and the light flashes on you, it's like you will see two distinct triangles here and everything else is warm. And that could happen if you overbake or you overpowder or you simply just use a shade that's just far too light for your skin tone. You only want to go at least just 2 shades lighter than your skin tone to create that highlight effect under the eyes. So we have our foundation on, we have our concealer on. This is where you can either powder under eyes and face, or just powder the under eyes and use another concealer for your contour or for your bronzer. I've been using deeper concealers for my bronzer, so that's why I will actually keep everything unset for now. Go in with a creamier concealer. This is a shade deeper than my skin tone. So as you see here, that's the shade that I'll go in on the hollows of the cheeks, or you could use a powder. I like to build my makeup, and whenever you start with the cream powder first, so we'll put this here, follow with a powder product of a similar shade, is going to help the makeup last also, and just have it appear more impactful, especially again, as we discussed earlier, if light takes away, you still want some of that saturation to remain. So I'm actually just taking my synthetic brush just so, you know, see it in action. And I like to keep the leftover foundation here. So when you mix the deeper shade, you have a little more control. So that if you want more, you'll add more. But again, instead of applying it directly to your face, where it might be tougher to blend, applying it on the back of your hand first and then applying it with the brush will lend you a lot more control. And I'm applying it right under the cheekbone. So if you place your finger here, you feel the bone, that's where we want to place the product. Yeah, see? Now we got a little sculpt. We got a little structure going on. If you want a smaller brush, you could use a smaller brush. Like for instance, this brush is a little smaller, so if you feel more comfortable using a brush that literally fits into the cheekbones, you can definitely make that happen. So we did this side, and another place to apply your contour or bronzer is near and around the temples, if you have the space to do so. If you have a bigger forehead and you want to bring it in, yes, the contouring shade is going to close the space. If you already have a small forehead, then I wouldn't recommend you put anything here, because you don't want your forehead and brow to start in the same place, right? So you have to use your judgment on how your facial features are and take it from there, right? I have a regular size forehead, so I just put a little bit around the hairline just to tie everything together. Now, I like this much because now I will have control over my powder products so that it doesn't appear too muddy, right? Because we don't want this to appear like a streak or like a really heavy bronzer or contour line. We want it to look, yes, have impact, but also look blended at the same time. Now, if you want to create a little more structure on the jawline, let me take a little more concealer. Still place it on the back of my hand. I could use a bigger brush now since the jawline is not as precise as the hollows. Right here and down. So see how that gave me a little bit of just a little bit of shadow. If you want a very strong looking jawline, just apply some makeup right here. And again, you got to pull down, because if you just go like this, it's going to look like a very intense line of demarcation. You want to pull the color down your neck. And if we were to go back to foundation, that's why it's important to have a foundation that matches your face. Otherwise, you'll also have to pull the foundation down your neck. And depending on your costume, if it comes up high, maybe you could get away with just applying it on your face if it's a different color from the rest of your body. But if it's a low cut costume, ensemble, you might have to bring the foundation down lower if it's distinctly different from the rest of your face, or for the rest of your body, I should say. So we got a little bit of shadow there. Sculpted and ready to go. If you want to apply a touch more on the bridge, so the nose contour, appropriate if you do want to narrow it down. Not necessary. I would take the leftover product and just carefully brush on the sides here. And it's just going to give a little bit of shadow, a little bit of shape. I don't usually contour or bronze my nose. I understand its role in place. It definitely ties everything together. But don't do putting concealer on the nose and then blending out from there, because you'll run into problems. You'll have concealer all over your nose. It'll look just strangely structured, just out of place. So if you want a little more control, I would even recommend that you use a smaller brush. Something like this, that's even smaller than the one I just used. Take the leftover deeper concealer and you just have, again, a more precise application. So everything's there and ready to go. So now we powder. Let's do it. What to use as powder? You have loose powder, which usually comes in a jar that looks like this with the sifter. Or you have a pressed powder that comes in pressed form in a compact. Either or works. I like loose powder specifically for setting, because usually loose powder is more finely milled. It melts into the skin nicely. It doesn't look layered. It doesn't sit on top. Looks something like this. Yeah. And in terms of what brush to use, something that has a teardrop or tapered shape like this. And because you see the tapered here, it fits very nicely under the eye, like so. See that? Versus something that's rounder. This is a dome-shaped brush. Maybe it's not going to fit as well as the teardrop brush. Now, you have what you have and you make it work, right? Maybe you don't have any of those brushes and you just have like a pom-pom brush like this. You could definitely still put a little powder there with that shaped brush. So you work with what you got. I'll go in my teardrop brush. Take some powder. So you see when you press it onto the sifter, it's going to pick it up just like so. A little tap. Powder magic spells. And then press it. Now, I haven't baked in months. I understand the importance of baking. It ensures the makeup stays on. It ensures that if you do sweat, the powder's going to catch it. I still like to press lightly to set the concealer first, and then you can bake afterwards. I find that's a far better method, because when you put so much powder on the concealer when it's still unset, when it still has a little creaminess to it, I feel you get an uneven application and it just looks so heavy and cakey under the eyes, and not an ideal technique if you have dry under eyes, to be quite honest. So if you want to still bake, I would still go in with a brush and lightly set the concealer, okay? And then you can take your puff, or you could take a sponge. So you pick up a little more powder and then press it on, like so. Now this is a very finely milled powder. So it's not going to be an intense application like you've seen, I'm sure, like on a lot of beauty YouTube and Instagram. And if you do go in with the rest of the face, the press and roll method is a great way to work loose powder into the skin. And also will ensure that your makeup stays throughout your performance. Now, depending also on your skin type, if you have very dry skin, then you wouldn't necessarily need to bake, right? Because since your skin is already dry, the creamy products will be your friend. And they'll probably dry down enough on their own that all you need is a light dusting of powder. If you are oily, then you'll go in with more powder. But you've already addressed that problem, or not a problem, just you'll address that concern from your primer step, because hopefully if you do have oily skin, you'll already apply a primer that has oil controlling properties, so you don't have to overload on the powder. Does that make sense? Now you see, if we use too much powder, you could kind of, you don't want to take away dimension, but we're ready for our next step, which is bringing back a little bit of color into the face. Now, this is where you can either use a bronzer or a contour. Contouring, the difference between contour and bronzer, contouring creates shape, it creates sculpt, much like how you would in drawing, painting, what have you, use shadows to create dimension and sculpt and definition. Bronzer is warming up the complexion, so it's not as a precise of an application like bronzer. And I'm going to grab my favorite contour. Oh my, if I could find it. Might have to use this. Let's see here. Nope, that's not it. This is what happens when you have too much makeup. Aha, I think this is it. Yep. Found it. Okay, I'll quickly show though. Ooh, squeaky drawers. An example of a contour would be a powder like this. It's a lot more cool, yeah? And a bronzer will be a powder like this. You see, it has a lot more warmth. If I were to swatch the two, this is bronzer, and then I'll swatch the contour. You can see that the contour is significantly cooler. Almost, I would say this is more of a neutral tone, which is perfect on me, because if it's too cool, then it looks a little muddy, and the bronzer shade is going to give you warmth. I would go with contour if I'm performing, because depending on the lights and what lights you have, you could look a little too warm. Or if, depending on your costume and the rest of your ensemble, maybe you'll go with bronze. Maybe that's going to just better align with what you're serving in terms of vibe and mood. I like to do contour for performing because I just want to have that structure so that no matter what light is on me, I'm not going to look too overly warm. Now, if we take the contour shade, I would pick a brush that's a little smaller in size. So if I were to pick this one up again, this is perfect because it's domed and it fits right here. Some people like to use angled brushes. An angled brush would have more of a angle, of course. And that will be, here it is, something more like this. This fits perfectly into the cheekbones. Wow. Right? Another one that could possibly work is something like this. This is more of a tapered brush where you see it comes to a point. You could use that to lightly contour because it fits right here in the cheekbones. I will use, why not? I'm going to use my angled brush. This is one of my favorite brushes. It's so soft and it doesn't move your makeup. In terms of where to place it, I like to place the contour powder on the edge of the brush here. So you see, I'm not placing it like this. I'm tilting it on its side, picking up the product on the side of the brush. Before you go in on your face, tap. Make sure your hands are clean, okay? Before we even started makeup, clean hands. The area you place your brush on will be the portion of your face that gets the most product. So if we want to place or want the majority of the product to start near the hairline, then we start on the hairline, right? Circular motions, and then start to take it down from there. You don't want to start your application here, otherwise it's going to be muddy here near the mouth. And then once you've applied the majority of the product, you use circular motions to blend it out. And notice I'm blending up. If you blend down, guess where it's going to go? It's going to go down. And then I don't take additional product and I move it up the hairline. And then I go down on the jawline. So we have a little bit of contour there, okay? You're like, Alicia, I messed up. It looks terrible. If you have a powder brush is something a little bigger in size. No extra product. Just buff it down. Buff it down. And we go on the other side. I'm going to go a little lighter. There we go. Much better. Jawline. I didn't dip back in. I bring everything up around the temple. Back down. Again, we want to circle up. And if we feel we apply too much, go with your big powder brush and buff it down. So now we have a little more structure to the face. Okay? If you want to carve a little more here, you can take the same brush you applied your under eye powder with, and maybe you do have a loose powder like this, or maybe it's a loose powder from what you use to apply under the eyes. You could use that to just carve under your contour, so you can better shape it. And sometimes you could use the brush that you applied, if you did your concealer with, if you went that route, and just to buff, so it could look a little smoother. And now you could also, I wouldn't apply more powder here if you apply cream concealer or just concealer on the side of your nose. I would rub, make sure you have an extra towel by hand, take off the excess and just go down the bridge of your nose just to further blend it out. In terms of blush, or if you want to go with bronzer over your contour, you can most certainly do that. I think contour is enough, especially if you already applied your concealer. That's going to add a little more pigmentation to the look, and it's going to already add that definition. If you insist, I get it, you're like, Alicia, I love my bronzer, then go in with a slightly bigger brush. I'm going to take not as big as this, but a little smaller. Yeah, this is still considered a powder brush, but because it's a little smaller, I have a little more control. You take your bronzer. You still stay on the hollows, still start high on the cheekbones, and just take it all over. But you see how the application is, it's just not as precise as a contour, because bronzer, again, its role is about warmth, is about adding a little bit of dimension, a little bit of like saturation. And just make sure you go in layers so you can control the application. Yeah? So you can see it's successful to apply both bronzer and contour. You just have to be careful with how much you do. We could either go in with blush or highlight. I like to leave the highlight towards the end. Or some people like to do their highlighter first so they know where to go with the bronzer. Totally up to you. For blush, however, for performing, you want to place it a little higher. You want to place it a little higher because blush, I think, is nice on the apples of the cheeks to create that flush, that everyday, like, carefree type of a thing. However, for performing, I truly feel the higher you place your brush, well, wrong word, blush, the more it's going to lift your face. And for a blush brush, we could use anything. This type of a brush is cool. Or we could go back to our dome that we had before. We could totally do that. Let's just use this one. I'm going to pick like this color. Whoa. Whoa. Tap off. Now remember, if we start it here, the majority of the color will go here. We don't want that. If we want to higher, then we got to start higher. And we could tap. And then bring it up. There we go. I like to tap, tap, bring it up. Once you've applied it, you use the swirl and twirl to blend. So now we have the blush, but it's pulling the face up. Let's do the other side. And this formula, it's so silky smooth, so I could pounce this on and not blend it out. So depending on the formula that you're working with will determine how you apply it. But generally, a lot of blush formulas are just so silky smooth that you could do the same thing, I feel. And once you've applied it, you just blend it out here. Okay. Now is highlighter time. I like to apply a cream stick something highlighter. So a highlighter stick looks like this. It's a little more emolliency. You take your finger and you apply it on that high point. Now, everyone's highlighting points are different. Some people's highlight point is here. Some's a little lower, a little lower. When you turn your head in light and you see where it hits, my point is like right there. And then that's where I apply the stick over that portion. Yeah. I like to go in with the cream first because it allows for better adherence for a powder highlighter. Because people who have drier skin, I would recommend a cream highlighter over a powder one. But if you want to layer it, start with your cream highlighter first as a base. And then you go in with a gelée type of highlighter, a powder highlighter, something suitable for your skin tone. Yeah. I'll use the same brush I applied the loose powder under my eyes with. And the same place I applied that cream stick, I apply the powder highlighter. Tappity tap tap. So you see when you turn your head, it hits it right where it needs to. And, lo and behold, you might think the more highlighter, the better. I would be conservative with this because, and you see that I'm not doing this. I feel people apply it like a streak. And when the light hits it, it just looks artificial and out of place. It looks like it doesn't belong with the rest of your makeup. So if you pounce it on, I feel it just better melts into the skin. It better melts into your blush, into your bronzer. So you have your highlight. I know. Complexion is now just done, and we have only 17 minutes to go over eyes. So if all else fails, just put on some lashes and you have your face at least. For eyes, primer. You gotta go with primer. You don't want your eyeshadow to slide off, to fade. You want it to really pop. And I don't like using concealer as a primer simply because concealers are made to be emollient since they go under the eyes, and under eyes for me tend to be drier than my actual lid. My lids are far more oily than my under eyes. You could apply it with a brush, you could apply it with your finger. I like to just pat down the excess so it melts better into the skin. I have my brows microbladed, so I don't need to go in heavy with them. But to quickly just go over them while my primer is drying down, oh my gosh, we could do just a class on brows. I like to take a pencil, start at the base, draw a line across to fill in those gaps, and just work the strokes up. You want to mimic the strokes of the hair and basically fill in those portions on the brow that need a little help. Or maybe you skip this step. Maybe you're not even going to be that close to the camera. Yeah, you just put some brow gel through so the hairs could have a little more structure. There we go. Primer should already be ready to go for shadow application. You could start with the matte, or you could start with the metallic or shimmer. I'm going to start with a matte that's a little deeper than my skin tone, so I'll go in with this one here. Whoops, this one here. And the type of brush you want to use is something domed. This is a crease brush. It goes right here, close to the crease. Let me pull you in a little closer. Now with that same shadow, the brush fits right into your crease, and you want to start on the outer portion of your crease. Use circular motions, so now you're carving out the shape of the eye. This is your first shade, preferably neutral, or you could use your contour shade as your crease shade. It'll still be perfect, since if it works on your cheeks, it most certainly will work on your eye crease. Windshield wipe, swirl and twirl. So now you have a little bit of shadow in the crease. The next shade will be to go in with something a little deeper, and I'll go in with a smaller crease brush. Especially if you have smaller eyes, this will be more suitable than a brush that's far larger, for instance, like this one. This will be better for bigger eyes, better for smaller eyes. But since we're going in with a darker color, you want a little more control. Excuse me, so many sirens. You'll go in with your darker shade with the smaller crease brush. Remember, the place where we apply the brush will get the most pigment. So we want to start close to the lash line and tap up toward that first shadow. And then fill up the outer edge, or rather, the outer corner of our lid. And once we've applied the majority of the product, we'll swirl and twirl. I like to twirl in towards the crease and lift the brow. Because if we're relaxed here, it's very hard to see what we're doing if we can't close. Now, I know that's a little difficult, and I realize that I've done this for a while, so it's easy for me to accomplish. But if we could close our eyes and keep the other one open while we apply and blend, that will be ideal. If not, look forward at least, so you can see where you're going with the shadow. Okay, let's do the other side. Remember, tap on from lash line and work your way up towards under the crease. And then once you've applied the majority of the product, you can swirl and twirl in towards the crease. Now, depending on your costume will determine whether you do blue or pink eyeshadow or purple eyeshadow. The techniques I'm going over right now is what you could apply to any color shadow. So if it was purple, you'll apply the lighter purple in the same manner across the crease like we did with the bigger blending brush, and then you'll go in with a deeper purple in the same manner we applied the dark brown shade with the smaller crease brush. And this is how you build the eye. If you want a little more smoke, I would still use a smaller crease brush. Go in with the deeper shade. I'm going in with the black. It's happening. Tap from the lash line up. You want to start with little product so you have more control over the blend. I'm picking up very little and I'm tapping first. You see that? You want to be able to get the product on the outer lid first and then use the tip of the brush to blend it in towards the crease. And we have that really nice gradient because we started with the lighter color, we followed up with a medium color, and now we have a nice backdrop to apply that deeper shade on. Same thing, start from the lash line, tap to apply. Work your way up. Swirl and twirl. Okay, take up a little more. You could tap off the excess. Once you've applied the majority of the product, you apply a little more across the crease. And now you got your smoky eye. We're almost done. I know we're running out of time. We got 10 minutes left. Smaller brush. See how significantly smaller this is than even the smaller crease brush we just used? We place both of them together. We're going to use this brush now for the lower lash line. I'll take the medium shade under the lash line right here. Foist. So again, we have that nice smoky backdrop for the black. Take the black like a little bit. Outer corner, keep it tight to the lash line. Connect it to the top. You got your nice soft black blend. Look up. Connect. If you need to go back to your smaller crease brush, maybe you want to swirl and twirl a little bit here around the edges, not with any additional product. Yeah? And all we need is our standout lid shade. It could be, it can match your costume. It could be a neutral. Let's say, like I'll go in with, why not? We'll go in with this shade. It's like a cranberry something. I like to apply metallics with the finger because the warmth from your finger will help emulsify the product and apply better on the lid. Thank you. Now, if you wanted to use a brush, I would use a shader brush. Flat, able to pick up product I wanted to use a specific one. If I could find it. Here it is. This is a shader brush. Very different from what we just saw, yeah? To pick up product, wiggle so you could get the pigment lodged in between the bristles so that you could place it on the lid successfully. Now, this is a very small brush, so it's going to take me a little more time to get the metallic all over the lid. But notice how I'm tapping, and I'm using the edge of the brush to carve under the crease so it doesn't travel up too high. And I like to tap so I have a little more control. And also, I feel that's the best way to deposit the most of the pigment on the eye. Whoa. And I'm actually going to go back here and clean up my application because a finger application is good to get the majority of the product on. But if you want a cleaner edge, I highly recommend you use a shader brush to shape that. And you see how the matte is running into the matte? To make that a smoother gradient, go back to your original small crease brush, pick up that shade, so we'll go back in with the black, tap over the edge where the metallic meets the matte. And you could also start to bring it in towards the metallic. So that just improves that gradient transition, yeah? And I'm going to do the same thing here. So now we got our standout lid shade. Woo! Now, I like to apply 1,000 colors on it at the same time. This is a great opportunity, and we can even use the same shader brush to apply like a lighter color on the inner corner. So I'm going to take this gold shade and this is where I love to apply like a fun, different color for stage. This is where you can really make the eyes pop. Apply a nice highlight color on the inner corner and then overlap it with the main stage lid shade here. So it doesn't come to an abrupt stop. It just melts really nicely into that metallic. And this brush is perfect because it's small enough to get right on the inner corner and it carves right where I need that precision to blend in well with that first metallic shade. Wow. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. If we wanted to have a little more fun, you're like, how much more fun can we have, Alicia? We'll take another, you know what? I'm going to go crazy. Go with the blue. Doing it. You're like, where am I going to put that? I like to apply fun shades right here on the inner lower half of the lash line. And if you don't feel comfortable using a shader brush, you could use a smaller pencil brush. A lot more tapered, maybe more suitable for this portion of the eye. So as promised, we'll take that blue shade, press it right against the inner lower lash line. And just take your time building on the color until it connects to that matte application that we did prior to the metallic one. Look how fun that is. Also, if you want to be more avant-garde, you could apply just the color on the inner lower lash line and do like a wing or lashes at the top. One of my most favorite things to do. I'm sorry if you hear sirens. I'm sitting in front of my window for this natural light. And unfortunately, my mic sometimes picks up the extra traffic noise, unfortunately. light pressure. Now, I didn't address this before. I'm one to do complexion first. People do their eyes first. And I understand the reasoning why. Because if you're dealing with a color like this, you could get some fallout. Fallout is when excess shadow falls onto your face. And then if you already have your makeup on, you're like, drat, I have to start over again. No, you can do the eyes first, and then you could do the complexion after. Especially if you have fallout. Once you've completed the eyes, you could use a wipe, or you could use eye makeup remover with the Q-tip to just wipe the excess and go in with your foundation and your concealer. Going back in with the gold. Pencil brush this time, I wipe the blue to place more of the gold here on the inner corner to just make it really pop. Okay. For lashes, well, that, or if you wanted to do liner, if you insist on the liner, I like to sketch instead of draw. What does that mean? If we take our kohl pencil, hold it onto the lash's edge, and carefully pull across. You could keep your eye open and look down onto the mirror so you can see where the pencil is touching down. Then close your eyes and look how I'm just using the side of the pencil to sketch out across the lash line. I'm not trying to draw a perfect line, because once you've applied your sketches, you can go back, let's say the pencil brush, and use that to smudge out your pencil so it could look like one cohesive line. So you have a little more definition on the lash line. Same thing here. I like to look forward to get the inner part of the eye and then really get onto the side of the pencil, because this is a tricky portion of your lash line. Close the eye again and continue to sketch until all the sketches have strung together. Use your pencil brush to combine. Okay, now for the finale round, you can apply your mascara or you can apply your lashes. If you're like, Alicia, I'm done, I'm not doing lashes. You most certainly can skip this step. I know I have a bunch of lashes. Choose a glue that you're not allergic to, please. Grab your favorite lashes. I like mine a little fluffy. First, take them off the package. Hold them upright like so. Take your glue and paint right along the edge. Before you do this, make sure you cut them to size, because not all lashes that come already packed fit everyone's eyeballs, okay? Now, this is the most important part. You have to wait until it dries down a little bit. If you don't wait until it's tacky, it's going to slip around and it's not going to fit. I like to apply my lashes with tweezers. That is a dangerous thing to do, so I am not going to demonstrate that technique. For the sake of time, you have a mirror, hold it down. Look down on the mirror so you can see your lash line. Plop it onto the center first. Okay, you got it on. Now press it on the inner corner and the outer corner. And then carefully use your fingers to press the strip against your real lash. I know that looked too easy. I've been doing this for a while. It takes practice, let me tell you, fam. Woo, does it take practice? There you go, Mr. Lash, so we could see you. Bloop, 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 bloop. I like Ardell's. Ardell's are just not expensive and they do the job. Look at that. My eye look just came to life. Because these lashes. Get ready for your lip, fam. We got to apply the lip and we call it an afternoon. Look down. Keep looking down. Get the center of the lash to connect with, not on the lash, on the skin. On the skin. Press the inner part of the lash line. Press the outer edge. And just carefully squeeze the lash line band against the skin so the lashes can combine. Take your favorite mascara, something that's waterproof, okay? Because if we sweating, we don't want our mascara to run down our eyes, unless that's the look, okay? If you're doing something like dead, scary, and that's on purpose, you could even use your mascara and press the mascara wand under the lash line and create that like haze dead effect. If you're going for something a little more traditional, waterproof mascara just on the lashes. Lip all depends on your costume. If it's something, if you want it to be neutral, neutral lip. I like to use a nudie type of a pencil. And this is the portion of the video or the lesson. If you want bigger lips, you gotta overdraw a little bit. And using a nude, your nude pencil shade is gonna help reshape the lip. Cool? For the sake of just this look, I'm going in with a nude. My nude again, your skin tone nude. Or you could go in with a red, a blue, black, purple, green, pink, magenta, fuchsia. This is a satin. If you want more glossy gloss, or if you want something that's going to stay a little longer, matte. A liquid lip feels awful, but it stays the longest. So if you know you need your lip to stay, then do a liquid lip. This is a beige lip gloss. It'll give the lip more shine, but it won't last as long. So maybe do this right before you go on stage. And look at us. We did it. Stage makeup is ready to go. We have a contour, blush, bronzer, highlight. We have this smoky eye with a little bit of color and a glossy lip. Again, depending on your costume or your performance, what have you, choose a lip that's going to best suit your performance so it lasts. Thank you so much, Isabel. Let me know if you have any questions, fam. An hour goes so quickly when you're doing makeup. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for coming. I'm happy to know that it was helpful to you. And thank you so much for coming to my workshop. I really appreciate it. And let me know if you want any of these products. Let me know what they are. I'm more than happy to send them via email, or admin will let me know if you ask, and I'll send it to admin so they can send it to you. Whatever works.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you so much.
Is it Alicia or Alicia?
It is Alicia.
Alicia. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I got that right.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody that came and watched. Go see the vendors. You got about 8 minutes. So if you don't have to do a break or anything, go check them out. They got great stuff. Cool.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, everyone.